Multiplayer games seem to be all the rage these days. I mean, you've got Call of Duty, WW2, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Battlefield 1, PUBG. As a matter of fact, they seem to be so popular that now people are wondering if single-player games are dead. But I say it's the other way around. Because as much as I would like to get back into a good multiplayer game, I just keep finding myself bored out of my gourd. It's also reliant on interacting with people. I don't want to do that. But that's not a problem for a single-player game because all the people aren't real. Now, if you're wondering where all this animosity towards games I don't generally play is coming from, well, EA started it, okay? If you haven't heard, Visceral Games, the guys who made the Dead Space series, has been shut down for good. And if you haven't heard, they were working on a single-player Star Wars game in the vein of Uncharted, which sounded awesome, and quite frankly was something that we haven't seen in a Star Wars game before. But those dreams have been dashed because EA didn't like the direction the game was going in. And considering the direction it was going in was single-player focused, I'm gonna assume they would prefer to have a multiplayer game. And then genius Microsoft decided to join the conversation and say that single-player games are financially complicated. Which is strange, considering Sony doesn't seem to have as many complications. So I decided I would help EA and Microsoft understand why people would prefer single-player games. So here are 5 reasons single-player games are better than multiplayer games, in no particular order. I am going to start with one very dear to my heart, because I have felt this pain time and time again. As my friend Frodo said, there is one wound in particular that has never fully healed for me, and that is the death of the Star Wars Galaxy's servers. When it comes to multiplayer games, dying servers is a constant problem. Some games can go on and on without worrying about that issue, and some games let you create private servers of your own, which is nice, but the official servers always die. Sure, SWTOR is doing strong right now, but it can't last forever. And when the Star Wars Galaxy servers were shut down, I was devastated. I still am devastated. That game was awesome. It was the chance to actually live in Star Wars. Even after the new game experience was implemented, it was still an amazing game. And that is something I will never get back. Sure, there are plenty of groups out there trying to recreate Galaxies, but even if they succeeded and recreated everything in that game, it will never be the exact same again. But if it were a single-player game, I could pop it into my disk drive, install it, and jump into the game like nothing ever happened. If there is anything you should know about me, it's that I like a good story. I mean, you might have figured that out already, but if you didn't, well, there you go. And the one thing multiplayer games almost never have is any story. You just run around and shoot your friends for a couple hours. And I know what you're probably saying. Multiplayer games let you create your own story. And sometimes that is true. Star Wars Galaxies was really good at that. But that is because there was so much to do. So much that you could experience that made the game feel constantly unique and exciting. But for most multiplayer games, you're just doing the same stuff day in and day out. And that isn't a story. That's just work. I have enough work in my real life. I don't need more in my video games. Now, of course, Star Wars Galaxies did actually have a story, just like most MMOs have stories, but it is usually presented in a way that is uninteresting, such as dialogue prompts. But even when the story is delivered well, it's too chopped up for me to feel invested in what's going on. The story in SWTOR is actually really good. The only problem is you spend so much time doing tedious tasks and boring side quests that enjoying that story is impossible. And I can't help but feel that this game would have been so much better as a single-player game, just like its predecessor. And it's pretty clear that the devs feel that way too, since that's basically how they treat it these days. Multiplayer games rely heavily on you wanting to shoot the same guns, play on the same maps, and do the same things over and over again. Even when you do play a different game mode, it usually feels relatively similar. You're still using all the same stuff, but maybe this time you're being slightly sneakier. Or maybe every couple of minutes you have to start shooting at an AT-AT. And while some multiplayer games have a better time of ensuring variety in your playthroughs, most of these multiplayer games are way too straightforward for any match to feel unique. And I'm left wondering, why am I doing any of this? None of this matters. If I just did the same thing over and over again, playing on the same maps, doing the same missions, what's the point? And that is the problem multiplayer games don't solve. repetitive gameplay can be okay as long as I'm given a reason to do it. And single-player games give you that. There is a reason why I keep sneaking into forts and assassinating the commander, because I'm trying to make Egypt a better place. And every guy I assassinate is one less evil person in the world. But if I didn't have any purpose, then doing the same assassinations over and over again would be mind-numbing. And honestly, I just wouldn't do it. Now, the big answer to the repetitiveness of multiplayer games is the multiplayer part. If I was playing with a bunch of friends, the repetitive gameplay would be far less noticeable. But if I wanted to do that, there are a few hurdles I need to jump first. If I want to play with a friend, that would mean they would first have to have the same console as me, then purchase the same game as me, and then be available at the same time as me. And considering I play on PC and have a pretty erratic schedule, that isn't likely. And even if the stars do align so that we can play together, sometimes it doesn't even matter because you can't find people to match up with, which means now you're limited to only purchasing games that have a decent player base. But if you aren't paying attention to that, then in some cases, you and your friend could purchase a multiplayer game and never get to play it because you didn't realize the player base was so low that you can't load a match. But I don't have to worry about any of those things with a single-player game. I can play it whenever I want to. I don't have to worry about what other people are doing or whether the servers are online. I can just start playing whenever I feel like it. And that is what I want. You have probably heard the term pay to win. It's been around for quite some time, and you've probably experienced it, either through microtransactions, pre-order bonuses, or dare I say it, loot boxes. Now let's get this straight. I don't have a problem with the concept of any of these things. Microtransactions help make free-to-play games sustainable, and pre-order bonuses can be a nice reward for putting your faith in a game that could end up terrible. And loot boxes, well, actually I do have a problem with loot boxes. Anyway, the point is these are systems that if used properly can be a good thing. But lately, they haven't been used properly. In Battlefront 2, loot boxes have become the primary way of getting upgrades and better equipment. And if you don't choose to spend more money on top of the $60 you've already spent for the game, odds are you're going to be outmatched by people who paid to have better gear than you do. And that just makes a game torture for someone who didn't pay into it, because their first experience with the game is losing, not because the opponent was a better player, but because they were wealthier. And that isn't fun. But in a single-player game, another person may pay for better equipment, and it has no effect on you. You'll never meet that player, nonetheless fight them in combat. And that means if you didn't start the game with super powerful equipment, well, then you're just experiencing the game as it was intended. And that's great. Although, to be fair, single-player games can feel the sting of pay-to-win as well. I'm looking at you, Shadow of War. Even then, though, it isn't as bad as multiplayer games these days. At the end of the day, single-player games just have so much more value to me than multiplayer games do. And I think that right now, the perfect example for me to point to is Assassin's Creed Origins, because that game has a fantastic story, I can play whenever I want, microtransactions and loot boxes aren't shoved in my face, and the gameplay itself is genuinely good. Although, to be fair, you do have to worry about dying servers with this game, due to the DRM that's forced onto PC players. But with that said, when I'm presented with the option of purchasing Assassin's Creed Origins or Battlefront 2, the choice is clear. And I don't think I'm alone in that. And if you agree with me, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. Yeah, I bet you didn't see that shameless plug coming. Also, if you want to hear me say why Skyrim sucks in comparison to Oblivion, make sure to check out this video on the top left here. Or if you want to see me trudge through Middle-earth Shadow of War, I have a 2-part Let's Play series you can check out as well. And if you're wondering, my schedule is Let's Plays every Tuesday and Thursday, and every weekend I upload a main video such as this one. I will see you on Tuesday. Goodbye.